everybody. My name is Brian Hofsummer, and this is class number 3. And before I get started, I wanted to read just some responses for some of the comments that I'd received over the last couple weeks. First of all, I will say thank you for all the engagement. I would love if there was even more. I know posting sensitive things on the internet is not a good idea, so don't do it. But if you want to text me or if you want to email me something, even some question that you have or something you just want to work out, even something you want to debate me on, I think you'll notice that this might be one of my more, shall we say, woo-woo classes, if you can say that. So I'm hoping for some pushback. I would love that. I would love some engagement in the form of some constructive criticism. So a few comments, though, that I got from the last couple of weeks. First one would be that fear prevents me from pouring love into people. Yes, fear prevents love 100%. It's very hard to occupy fear and love in the same place with another human being. The second one is that another comment says, complete people listen more than they talk. Yes, I think you'll notice that anyone who is spiritual and at their best, they listen way more than they talk, even though they have tons of advice and wisdom to give. Third one says, struggling with the same issues equals the need for discipline. And yes, if you are struggling with the same things over and over again, don't feel shame. Don't dog yourself. Don't knock yourself down to peg. You're human. That's why we need discipline. Discipline is how we become adults instead of children. So don't shy away from the need for discipline. Discipline is the intentional act of bettering yourself every single day, and it's what we're called to do as human beings and as Christians. It's part of why Christ says, pick up your cross and follow me. It's not put it down. It's not do this once. It's do this and keep doing it. And the last one is that fear and condemnation rather than engagement. People who, when you engage somebody who has fear, when you engage somebody who is condemning of different people groups and people who look and think and act different than you do, that's not the answer. It's not what Jesus did. It's not what the disciples did. The disciples went to all nations, all people, all types, especially the ones who were shunned by society. And I would say, this person asked me, well, how do you talk to people who have a lot of fear and condemnation? And what I said is that the Bible says, about these people, he who has ears, let him hear. Meaning, if the person's going to listen, then they'll listen. And if not, you can go somewhere else. You've tried. You've done your best. And in my opinion, it's better to ask questions when you're with people who seem to be fairly close-minded, rather than just continually try to give answers and get into debates and get into conflict. So with that, let's go ahead and get started on today's lesson. Today's lesson has to do with the non-attachment and the acceptance of reality. So I'm going to get just a little bit technical today before I get to the more practical stuff. We got to go way back to the beginning. We got to go way back to questions like, what is your relationship with reality? Like, weird question. I know, weird question. This is my analogy, just to try to explain things. This is supposed to be a river. This is a river, and it's, see this arrow, this means it's flowing this way. And this is my question for you today that I'll try to cover. What are you doing? If river represents this flow of reality, this flow of time, what is your relationship to that river, to that flow of time? Are you moving with the flow of reality? Are you moving against the flow of reality? Or are you clinging to the rocks and the branches that are stuck in the middle there for dear life? Let's start with moving against. It's just like this idea of moving against the flow of reality is the very same feeling as moving against the flow of, say, a river. If you've ever tried to swim upstream on the Missouri River, or any other river for that matter, good luck. Anybody who knows who's tried to swim or even paddle sometimes against the flow of the river knows that if you stop for a moment, you're going to go backwards, or you'll feel like it's going backwards. There's this idea of running away from God. Right? We have many examples of people who were running away from God. God had a plan, there was a flow to reality, there was an intended purpose, and people ran away from it, and they kept kept feeling like things just kept going wrong along the way. One of our examples in history is this idea of is this person named Moses. Moses was the people who took the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land. And the first thing we know about him is that he didn't start out that great. He was weak. He was not assertive. He did not have a commanding presence. He ran away from his responsibility that God had intended for him. And he finds himself in Exodus 3 in the face of something very strange. It was a burning bush. And this burning bush spoke to him. And we see here in Exodus 3, we says, Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me.' And they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what should I tell them?' And God said to Moses, 'I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you.' God said to Moses, 'Say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This name you shall call me from generation to generation.'" A really strange passage. It's a burning bush that's not consumed by the flame that he's talking to. And when Moses asks him, what is your name? He says, this name, I am. Now this name is very hard to translate. It means a variety of things. And I'd ask you to open your mind to this, because it is a very hard thing to translate. You could translate it, I am, or I am who I will be, or I am life. Some of the other translations might even go as far as to say, I am existence, I am consciousness, I am creation incarnate. One of my favorite things, especially for the purpose of our lesson today, is I am reality. I am what is. Right? It's a very interesting name. I am. Just being. Being incarnate. Right? And this is important how we move on, because we see that God is so expansive that it's hard to put a name on God. You know, how do you define a being who is and was and will be? How do you define a being who created creation? Everything that we perceive, somehow God is bigger, is better, is all-encompassing. Our second story comes from Jacob and his encounter with the angel. Remember, Jacob had spent so many years after stealing the birthright from his brother, just running away and just deceiving people and getting into all kinds of trouble. And there's this moment where finally he's about to go and face Esau, and he has this encounter of an angel. And it's funny because the angel, they wrestle. It's like they have this wrestling match. And at the end of it, the angel touches the hip of Jacob, and the hip dislocates after all of that, the whole night of fighting. Sort of saying, you know, like, I can wrestle with you, but I can win if I want to, says the angel, right? But from this, Jacob changes. He changes his name from Jacob, meaning the leg puller, deceiver, to Israel. Israel meaning he who wrestles with God, or wrestling with God. What a weird, fantastic, great name for a nation that's going to bear the name of God. Wrestles with God. I think it's very appropriate. This is what we do as people of God. We wrestle with God. We wrestle with reality. We wrestle with existence. We grapple with difficult things. It's part of the struggle. It's part of who we are as spiritual people. Sin and rebellion against God is very much a moving against. The Bible talks about things like morality as if God intended a certain way for things to be, and we can say no all we want to, but it's about as ridiculous as jumping up and down trying to break gravity. It's like there are things that are going to happen the way that God intended them to happen, and the more that we move against them and say, no, I think they should happen this way, good luck, try that out, see how it works for you, right? You know, when you go against the created order, it's almost like you're playing chess. I like this analogy of chess. What I mean is chess has a certain rules to the game, and you can move the pieces in different orders, and you can develop different strategies, but you can't just say, the pawn gets to move diagonally all the way around the board. No, you can't. That's a violation of the basic rules of the game, by the way, that even God obeys. Even God, when he was in the form of Jesus, did obey the rules of creation, right? He didn't just break them arbitrarily. In fact, when there's a breaking of the rules of creation, we call it a miracle. We call it a miracle. Non-acceptance of reality. And I'd like you to think about this and maybe get some engagement about this. Non-acceptance of reality is the same thing as rebellion against God. Think about that for the moment. The God who set up the cosmos, who created creation, who created all that is. And we are going out into the cold and saying, I don't like the cold. Why is it winter? Right? I suffer a tragedy, and why is this tragedy happening? It's not supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to be here and I'm over here. Why am I over here? Right? Very much so. You will find that the people who do that more and more and more, it's like they're rebelling against God. They have no faith. They have no trust. They're continually judging and challenging reality itself. It's kind of like, just a little side note, there's even a concept in Buddhism called dukkha. I think it's really interesting because one of the basic tenets of Buddhism is actually that the non-acceptance of suffering actually creates more suffering, which I think fits very well within the Christian message. It's this idea that if I suffer and I don't want to suffer, that not wanting to suffer actually creates more suffering. Breaking a leg and then continually just, gosh, how come I break a leg? God, why did I break my leg? Why did I do this? Why did I do that? Instead of just saying, I just broke my leg. Okay, I accept this. Let's work with it. Right? More suffering added upon the suffering that we already experience from this fallen world. One of the best examples of non-acceptance of reality and rebelling against God is this idea of Cain, what Cain did. Remember, Abel made the good sacrifice. Cain didn't make the good sacrifice. He made the unacceptable sacrifice. And we don't even know what that sacrifice is. But the point is that God said, hey, if you do what is right, won't you be rewarded? And the implication here is Cain's like, I don't want to do what's right. I want to have it my way and still get the benefit. And what happened to Cain? He was filled with bitterness, wrath, hate. He ended up killing his own brother who was doing right. Rather than do the right thing himself, he killed the thing that was in judgment of him, which was his brother that was doing right. Right? You can imagine some of these characters. Jacob when he wasn't at his word, when he wasn't at his best. Moses when he wasn't at his best, running away, running against God, rebelling against God. There's this arrogance, there is this bitterness, and there's this hopelessness. Because it's like everything in reality is opposing you. It's against you. And you're running away from it, and you're opposing it. Good luck. Who do you think is going to win in the end? You're going to be like somebody wrestling with an angel, and the hip is going to go out. And that's God's little reminder of, like, you're human. You don't get to write the rules of chess. You play chess. You understand? Second thing I would say is this idea of holding on. Holding on is just like I'm going down a river and something happens and I am holding on for dear life. This happens sometimes when life is going too fast or something is happening that is just too terrifying, and I just grip the steering wheel on life and I just go, I just hold on for dear life. Not thinking about the future, not thinking about how to do things differently. I'm holding on. I'm not letting go. This is a lot like the rich young ruler. Remember, the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and he says, hey, I've kept the commandments. I've been good. I still don't, what else do I need to do for salvation? What else I still don't feel complete. Pursuing completeness, I don't feel complete. What does Jesus say? Jesus says, go sell everything you have to the poor. And the rich young ruler went away in sadness. It's like, yeah, I know. What's holding you back? You're holding on to your riches. There's something in your life that's holding you back. You may have all of these things going for you, but the thing you're pursuing the most is just being rich, just being famous. You're holding on, and if you would let that go, you would find what you're looking for. You would find salvation. You would find completeness. There's this idea of living with faith. This is from Romans 1. It talks about the righteous will live by faith. And I like to change that a little bit. I don't like using the word faith. I think it's worthwhile. It works. It functions. I like using the word conviction. And the reason why is this. When people in our day and age think of the word faith, they often think of this heady kind of thing, or maybe this foolish thing. I like the idea of conviction because it's as if you take that word faith and you add emotion. There's passion for this thing that I believe in. Right? Living by conviction. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to live by faith? I think it means you do the right thing in as much as you can understand, in as much as you can perceive, and then you walk forward. You don't get to control the future. You don't get to know what's going to happen. You don't get to predict even what's going to happen. Things are going to come around and they're going to smack you. People going down this river, they get smacked by tree branches. They get smacked by rocks. What do? Do you cling on to that rock so that you don't get smacked by more rocks? Or do you take the hit and say, this is part of living in a fallen world, but I got to move on? Right? Living by conviction means that the way things are going are the way things go, and I will do my best. I will make the right chess moves, but I can't rewrite the rules for the chess. And I can't stop playing. I can't just stop playing. Right? Part of what you'll see, even in the two stories I mentioned earlier, is this idea of death and rebirth. Something has to die in order for something better to happen. Right? Oftentimes this is symbolized as a change of name. A change of name. Jacob into Israel is a great example. Luke 9 as well. I'll read this for you. And as I read this, I want you to think about this idea of holding on or attachment. Jesus says, as they were walking down the road, a man said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus replied, foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. He said to another man, follow me. But he replied, Lord, first let me go bury my father. Jesus said to him, let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Still another said, I will follow you, Lord, but first let me go back and say goodbye to my family. Jesus replied, no one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the service in the kingdom of God. Did you hear that? No one who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. I think that's living by conviction. Right? What's your job? Put your hand on the plow and move forward. So many people made so many excuses. They were holding on to, I got to go bury my father. I got to go do this thing. I got to go sell this land. Yeah, okay, go do that stuff. And then what? Are you going to find completeness? Are you going to find salvation doing those things? Or are you going to let go of those things for adventure? Those things right there, that the people that Jesus was calling to, he's calling them to adventure. And they said no. They could have been the disciples. Who knows? They could have lived maybe a harder life, but a more meaningful and purposeful life. That was a call to adventure. And you don't get to experience the adventure of life if you're holding on to stuff. If you're holding on to money. If you're holding on to bad relationships. If you're holding on to bad jobs. If you're holding on to the same belief system that hasn't been working and won't be working. Right? You have to risk letting go and possibly failing in order to get the benefits of new, something better. And something I can say that should be pretty non-controversial is that risk is unavoidable. Part of living life is risk. If you're going to get into relationships, there's going to be risk. If you're going to have children, there's going to be risk. if you're going to strive, if you're going to start a business, there's going to be risk. Everything good in life has to do with risk. God himself took a risk on us. Seriously, it's inherent in love. It's inherent in full life. Is that requires risk. There's a possibility that things could go wrong, right? But there's every possibility that if we don't try, if we're one of these people holding on to dear life on these rocks, maybe one won't hit another rock, but you know what? Everything else will go by us. Everything else will go by us, and we'll be left behind. And then we will become bitter. We won't transition. I meet these people, for instance, haven't changed in 30, 40 years, haven't gotten another single friend, has stopped educating themselves, haven't developed themselves, still clinging on to the same beliefs, haven't continued transforming themselves, imitating Christ. Those people are often bitter, right? Because what happens over time is you lose your mobility. Things change, and if you haven't adapted, they pass you by. You lose friends. You lose family members. If you don't meet new people, what's going to happen? You're going to be lonely and bitter. And the more and more you hold on, the more you're going to feel it. Until maybe you die on a rock somewhere, having missed so many opportunities in life. And I don't want that for you, and I don't want that for me. We have to learn to let go. We need to stop holding on, right? Well, we referenced. Let me start right here. What we want to do is move with, right? God has a plan. I know you've probably heard this, but God has a plan. We don't know what that plan is most of the time. It's only in hindsight that we get to see it. But he calls us to adventure. He calls us to a journey. I want us to be people who move with the river, right? Who move with the flow of reality, who can experience life on its terms and adapt and overcome and learn and grow. It's dynamic. It's adventurous. It's exciting, right? Ecclesiastes 3, that famous song from the 70s, I believe, says there is a season for everything. You know, a time for good, a time for bad, a time for death, a time for life, a time for war, a time for peace. We have to accept both. It's part of existence is accepting both. Accept, accept, accept. Right? Job is an example of somebody who accepted things. He's actually a paragon of what's called grieving. Grieving just meaning I'm accepting something I didn't want to accept. I'm accepting something negative even if I don't like it. Because I don't get a choice. I don't like gravity, right? The more I curse gravity and jump up and down, the more my feet hurt. But gravity is still gravity. Reality is still reality. It's time to accept certain things in my life. It's time to accept certain things about how crappy life can be. Because it's not like me not accepting it is going to make it any better. It tends to make it worse. Job is he's a prodigy in terms of grieving. He's great at grieving. He went through a lot. He went through a whole lot. And at the end he was rewarded. Why? Because he fought hard? No. He accepted things as is. And then he was rewarded for it. I think that's why he is an example of faith. And I think that's why God came down, and even though he had some harsh words, he was rewarded with just an audience with God. Can you imagine that? And go check out the end of Job. Watch what God says. He asks so many questions himself. Where were you when I created the foundations of the earth? Good question, right? Where were you when I put gravity in place? Where were you where I created the metabolism, the metabolic structures of organisms? Where were you when I created the laws of physics? Right? We were nowhere. We were nowhere. These are things that we are subject to. Right? Remember me referencing David before, with David and Bathsheba. I guess I didn't reference him. Remember the story of David and Bathsheba. The story goes, of course, that David, while Bathsheba's husband Uriah was away, he saw her on the rooftop, and he came in, and they sinned together. And then in order to cover it up, because she got pregnant, he went and had her husband go out and fight in the difficult parts and die. Right? He was running away from what God's intended purpose was. That was not supposed to be his wife. In order to make that happen, he continued going even further, trying to control and saying, well, I can do this and I can do that, and I'm not going to get punished for it. Right? And as punishment, God said, because you are going to do this, your child will die. And Nathan came and delivered that message. Well, what did David do? It says here in 2 Samuel, starting 2 Samuel chapter 12, starting in verse, it looks like verse 15. It says, after Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had borne to David, and he became ill. David pleaded with God for the child. He fasted, and he spent nights lying in sackcloth on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he refused, and he would not eat any food with them. On the seventh day, the child died. David's attendants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought, while the child was still living, he wouldn't listen to us. And when we spoke to him, how can we now tell that the child is dead? He may do something desperate. David noticed that his attendants were whispering among themselves, and he realized the child was dead. Is the child dead? He asked. Yes, they replied, he is dead. Then David got up from the ground, and after he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes, he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request, they served him food, and he ate. His attendants asked him, why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept, but now that the child is dead, you get up and eat. And he answered, while the child was alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. You see, even though David initially, through his arrogance and pride, sinned, was running away from God, and was disobeying the rules of reality, committing many sins, he paid for that. He pleaded to God. And then when God said no, and the child died, he washed his face, he ate, he said, okay, this is what it is. This is another example of grieving. This is no example of accepting reality. Nobody in this world wants to lose a child. But the only thing worse than losing a child is losing a child and then fighting the rest of your life for why, right? And trying to make sense of it. I don't know that there is much sense to it. This is part of what we deal with as human beings. And accepting it, and accepting that God is still in control, is what can bring peace, even in the worst of situations. By the way, this is part of what the atheist trilemma is all about. I don't know if you've heard of the atheist trilemma. Atheist trilemma is something like this. If God is good, and God is all-knowing, then why doesn't he do anything? Anybody asked that question before? It's a hard one, isn't it? Well, I think, in essence, we have the answer in Jesus. We have the answer in Jesus, and that answer is empathy. Notice what God does. When God solves the problem of creation, when God solves the problem of suffering, he doesn't do it by waving a magic wand or creating some rules. God does it by entering into the same reality that we deal with through Jesus, experiencing all of the pain, all of the heartbreak, and accepting it, and then conquering it. Right? He's not aloof. He's not distant. The same God who created reality is still obeying the rules of reality. And I can't tell you why. I can't tell you why the rules are the way the rules are. We may find out that in order for love to happen, there also has to be hate. We may find out that in order for good things to happen, we have to allow for the possibility of bad things. I don't know. I think those arguments are good. Right? I can tell you this. Acceptance of reality helps us move through life peacefully, calmly. Even Jesus, as he walked towards the cross where he was about to die, he did it willingly. He could have called 10,000 angels, and he didn't. We even sing a song, blessed be the name of the Lord, he gives and takes away. Right? In good times and in bad times. This is a marker of faith. It always has been. Whether things are going well or whether things are going poorly, blessed be the name of the Lord. Not because we're just in a good state right now, but because he's in control. Something helpful to alcoholics. This is part of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I love it. It's called the Serenity Prayer. This is a daily practice that a lot of people have used. And I find it to be fantastic. It's wonderful. It's succinct. And it goes like this. It says, God, grant me the serenity to change the things that I can, to accept the things that I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. Right? Grant me the serenity to change the things that I can change, to accept the things that I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. Wise, wonderful words. Another one I have is a quote from Eckhart Tolle, who's kind of this mystic kind of guy, but I like his quote. And what he says is, when you complain, you make yourself a victim. Accept the situation, change the situation, or leave the situation. Everything else is madness. That's a quote that goes through my mind quite often. And I like the idea of, well, when something happens, especially things that we don't like, because we're okay with things that we like, right? What can we do? Well, we can accept it and move through it. We can try to change it if we can. Sometimes we have to leave it. We have to distance ourselves from those things, right? Fighting against it, raging against it, not liking it, complaining, none of that works. It's madness. It's just like bathing in the problems rather than getting out of the bath. So let me ask you, because this can be a bit of a tough subject, but look at your life. Let me ask you these two questions. Number one, how are you moving against reality? If there's something about what you're doing where you're moving against reality, I'll say this, you're going to feel it. It's going to feel like resistance. You're going to feel like life is hard. Like everything I do seems to go wrong, right? Well, maybe changing the situation is not what you need to be doing right now. Maybe it's just accepting. I know lots of people with functional limitations, physical, mental, and otherwise, right? What good is it for me to get an amputated leg and then spend the rest of my life hating the fact that I have an amputated leg? No, we don't usually applaud those people. The people that we applaud are the ones that struggle admirably with limitations and still are able to maintain their dignity, right? Let me ask you, what do you need to let go of? What do you need to let go of? Are there rocks in your life? Are there trees? Is there anything that's happened in your life where it smacks you upside the head and rather than take the hit and move on, you grab on and hold on to dear life, and you've been doing that for years? Are there relationships that you need to distance yourself from or just set good boundaries from? Are there jobs that you need to leave? Are there different belief systems or different things that you've been doing all of your life that aren't working and won't work, but you don't know what else to do? Well, let it go. Pray to God, get some good counsel, and maybe something better will happen. That's the whole point of living by faith, right? You do the best you can. You put one foot in front of the other in expectation that something good will happen, but more importantly, that the one who created you sees all, knows all, and ultimately the arc of the universe bends towards good. God bless you, and I hope you have a good week. Take care.